Welcome, everyone. This is our podcast number 2. As you know, we are discussing with Professor Shane from Biola University. We are discussing subjects about budgeting, investment, finance in general. This is a really interesting series of five podcasts that we're recording. So, yeah, thank you, Shane, as always, for enlightening us and joining us again.
Yeah, no, happy to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. Cool. So today we're going to talk about budgeting and how do we budget like a pro, basically. That's kind of like the like the subject. And I was mentioning in the prep that this is one of the things that I feel the weakest of all the subjects. So definitely I'm going to learn a lot from this one, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. Yeah, so let's get started. Shane, so I don't know, I want to start with this question. Like for you, what's the secret of budgeting? What do you think is the secret? Yeah.
I know. So for one of the secrets is to actually not use the word budget. Budget is one of those words that causes extreme disgust or fear in many people. And I remember I was at a church meeting, and after service, everyone was kind of meeting each other, and I shook hands with this person, and they asked what I did, and I said I teach finance, and then immediately her body shook, and she's like, "Oh, you're the one that tells me not to spend money," and I think that there's a bit of a visceral response often with budgeting, and really it's so much like dieting, where a budget, often people feel like it's like a handcuffs, or a ball and chain, where you kind of get shackled. You have all these things you want to do, ways you want to eat, ways you want to live, and a budget comes along. And I think really it's not necessarily about the fact that the budget tries to limit you a bit, but often people's visceral response to budgeting has to do with their past, where they've tried and they've failed. And what budgeting does is it reminds them of past failures. It reminds them of there's a bit of shame, that I really tried and I just couldn't do it, or relationally it caused so much trouble. And the number one reason for divorce, or at least a top reason listed, is money. Money often wreaks havoc in relationships, and so, I think if I were to kind of pick one way that budgeting can move from being something that people hate to something that people actually enjoy, it would have to be this idea of moving away from budget to track, or and it's this mindset. So instead of trying to set up an account and basically tell yourself how much you're going to spend ahead of time, that actually sets you up for failure when you just say, all right, I'm going to just do 200 for this, 100 for this, because there's so much in life that is unknown, and you just can't control what's going to happen in the future. And so when you do a traditional budget, you actually are stepping out into the unknown, and you're trying to do something that's actually impossible, which is control the future. And instead, there's actually a different paradigm or a different mind set. And that mindset is to simply track what you're doing. In many ways, it's shining a light very bright. And so the more that you just track really well, you just keep an account. And then that creates a clear view of what's going on. And that it's almost like knowing is more than half the battle. I'd say knowing is 80 to 90% of what's needed is simple knowledge of what you're doing. And so often what people do is they'll set up a budget, they go really hard, just like a crash diet, and then they fail, and then they just stop. But if your whole focus isn't on changing your behavior, but simply tracking what you're doing, then that creates so much good information that you can then start to be accountable to yourself. You just start to see light, and for me, when I know that what I'm doing is going to be clearly displayed for me and for others, then I behave better. You know, there's a scripture that says, what you shine a light on becomes light. And I think so often when we know that if we can just get that extra, you know, that really fancy dessert at the restaurant, and no one will ever know about it, you know, that we just spent, you know, $18 on something that wasn't really that needed. But if that behavior all of a sudden just gets put up onto a big, you know, bulletin board, then really things start changing. And add to that your spouse or a friend, someone you trust, and you just kind of show them your books. Then you create a really natural mechanism for changing how you spend. And you also, when you know everything, you can counter bad things from happening. So you can see clearly ahead of time that you're on track to spend more than you earn. And whereas if you're just kind of going along hoping that there's enough money in your bank account at the end of the month, then you're kind of defensive. You're basically reacting to everything. So tracking and a daily tracking is actually the easiest way to do it. It only takes about 2 to 3 minutes if you do it daily, and then it's about 15 to 20 minutes if you do it weekly, and then it's you know it's a couple hours if you do it monthly.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, this is super interesting, the paradigm shift from budgeting to tracking, because I'm one of those persons, like every, I don't know, once every 2 years, we sit with my wife and I sit and we do a budget. And I think it's pretty useful because that gives us bucket of how much, in our case, when we do it, it's more about how much, what's our kind of like burn. So it's like, okay, we pay this of a mortgage, we pay this of this. So that gives us enough ideas. Okay, actually, this is how much we spend monthly, and this is where we think some surprises can be. But never got to the point where we can just like, track all that. Like, definitely that's not something that we do, which is, and it's really interesting. You're mentioning that paradigm shift. It's like, it's more about tracking on where you are, instead of just setting yourself with some of the goals. And I like the comparison with dieting, because that's one of the things that I personally discovered, that a lot of the people is like, okay, diet, I need to count this, and I like to eat just salads or something like that. And I've discovered personally that it's more about eating a well balanced, and it's like, okay, at this time maybe it's better to just eat a fruit. So having a lot of those and things like that, instead of kind of like controlling everything and to the last calorie, that actually creates a lot of stress, and you kind of fail pretty quickly.
And so most people don't track because they think it's too much work, and really, you know, if you're tracking by hand, that is too much work. I think for most people, we've really evolved in our financial lives it used to be you only had cash, and then eventually had a checkbook, and you know, someone wrote 1 or 2 checks at most a day, and then maybe just 1 or 2 checks a week. And so you balance your checkbook, which means you just keeping track of whether someone's cashed a check. But nowadays we're having so much daily transactions through apps, through Venmo, through Cash App, through whatever it is, and there's just inflows and outflows just going, you know, all over the place. And so tracking seems to be unreasonable for most people. However, with that complexity, technology there are products that really, there's fintech that really makes it so much easier, to where I only spend just a couple minutes a day. And what's so nice, if you use a budgeting app on your phone or budgeting software on your computer, then once you do this daily tracking or weekly tracking, then you can pull up pie charts, you can pull up really good infographics that show exactly what's happening, so that when you do sit down with your spouse, or you sit down with your household, or your friends, I mean, right away you see exactly what's going on. And the top app that I think is that you'll see recommended by top pros, I've gone to personal finance conferences, top ones from around the country, and this is the premier app that most people are recommending now, and it's called You Need a Budget, or YNAB. And so really is a great app. You know, and I did everything manually through a spreadsheet for about 12 years. And then once I really discovered the power of YNAB, then I still use my spreadsheet, but I output all the YNAB data and put it into the spreadsheet. But YNAB is really all we really need. And I've saved hundreds of dollars, if not more, because of the way they've designed YNAB. But you just download it. It's about $7 or $8 a month, and you can have it manually. You can have it automatically import transactions, and then you just spend the time categorizing them. You know, is it groceries? Is it rent? Is it whatever? And that's tracking. You know, that's basically all you do.
Yeah. Well, I'll definitely check it out. I've tested a couple, not tested even, like I have Mint, for example, and I have Credit Karma, and I mean they are useful. They allow me to see kind of like my consolidated information, but I feel that they fall short on that part, like of the tracking, or sometimes things don't fall in the right category. So I stop trusting the product, or one of the things that I don't like that much is two things, actually. One of them is when they remind me, it's like, you were over budget from a small thing, and I'm like, I mean, who cares about $5 above budget or something like that? So that's one of it's an unnecessary notification. And the other one, and I think I was telling you this the other day, was they just recommend, some of them just recommend you credit cards, and I'm like, I'm trying to save money, I don't want the credit card. So that's another thing.
When you do free ones, like Mint is great, but when you do it and it's free, then it creates kind of, you know, Credit Karma is the same. You have a bit of an ad problem, but YNAB doesn't have that problem, which is nice. And the biggest power of YNAB, their tracking is nice. You know, I think it's good. But the biggest power is in their, what they call budgets, but it's really what it is a virtual envelope system. And so each time you get paid, it shoots up in green, and you have to allocate it into different buckets or budgets or envelopes. And so as you do that, what Mint doesn't do, and what most other budgeting systems don't do, is as you spend money, you know, you're going to draw from those envelopes. If you have money left over, it carries the balance into the next month. And so it essentially becomes a reserving system. And so then you can do things like save for your car. And so every time you get paid, you know, you're going to put, you know, $200 into the car envelope, and then it just grows. And so, you know, and what's also nice is the budget, the envelope, it's a color, and green is nice. And then it turns kind of an orangey color as it gets lower, and then it goes red. And it's a soft signal. It's not like an email. You can have it email you if you want, but when, and your whole goal is you can move money from the different envelopes, so you can draw from different ones. And but this idea of virtual envelopes, it's psychologically the way that you can save money better, is that you start to make things separate, because the more specific you name something, the science is called endowment theory. You become attached to it, and you don't want to invade it. So the worst thing you can do is you create a huge savings account, and it just it's one big pile of money. And so then you're just going to kind of keep drawing from it, because it's not personal. But let's say a part of your savings is a vacation at the beach in Cabo. So if you create an envelope or a bucket that says, you know, 2023 Cabo, feet in the sand, you're not going to invade that. You know, you're going to try everything to your utmost to not take money from that, because you know that you're losing your feet in the sand. And so the YNAB lets you create, you know, I have about 45 different envelopes, and I have some for, you know, home repair, some for running shoes. I don't invade my running shoe one, because I'm like, well, where am I going to get running shoes? You know, and so yeah, it's really, it plays well with your human psychology by creating an easy way of having envelopes and buckets that are, and you name them very specific, and then you don't invade them that way as easily, at least.
Yeah, this is super interesting. The fact that it's that envelope system, definitely not that further along, but one of the tricks that I found personally is just setting an autosave, like when I get paid. Well, actually not when I get paid, but I know 2 times per month, I just transfer money automatically to another account.
Yeah.
And that's the only way that I've known that I don't touch that money. Like I actually, it's funny because psychologically it has made me to think of it as an expense, but in
Yeah.
a good way, because it's not an expense. I'm actually just saving money. So that has been one of the kind of like the ways that I've found. And the other trick that I found, and I know you talk much about credit card, and I would like to touch that subject because I like your perspective at that point. But one of the things that I found is I have a credit card that is for my like going to the supermarket, gas, and all that. And I use credit cards much for the cashback. So I already have so I know the red card has this budget, and then the blue card, which is the one that I use for restaurants, travels, and all that. I know already that budget. I know if I'm going over budget, okay, I can just not use the blue card.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then that has been another way, but it's hard to control. So,
Yeah.
but at least that has given me that kind of like separating things, because when I had was running everything in the same account as you were saying, it's unmanageable. You don't really know where you're spending your money, right? Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I get touching this subject of credit card. Like that's one of the areas that I know you kind of have touched in other conversations and the training with the team. We'd love to hear your thoughts about your perspective on credit cards for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So credit card is two products in one. The first product is a medium of exchange. It allows you to buy things without cash and buy things electronically online. And it does so in a way where you earn points, travel, cash. That product is great. I love that product. The second product it's a lender. So it's a mini bank, and it's the most horrible lender. It's payday loans are the worst, and then next to that is credit cards. So for someone who views a credit card as access to capital, to money to finance their purchase, that is a very bad decision, a very bad financial choice. And it's 18-20% interest rates. It's the kind of thing that it compounds on itself when you owe money. It grows, that your owing of money grows exponentially. And so it really traps you. And it changes your psychology. Because what credit card companies know is if you're viewing this credit card as a way to delay your purchase, then they take away a critical barrier that we all need when buying something. And so normally when you buy something with cash, you are doing exchange. And so it's actually a little bit painful because you're seeing this loss of money, but you're gaining something. And that pain is actually really useful. It stops you. It creates a bit of a barrier. But if you can just buy something in there and you don't see any loss, then you receive dopamine. They've shown this. And so people will actually spend more because they like that feeling of buying something without a consequence, because the consequence is delayed so far into the future. And so it can create an addiction to spending. And, I'm not addicted, but they have shown studies that the moment you use credit cards over cash, you'll spend 30% more. And really, and I tested that and it was true, and so I think credit cards are dangerous. They're dangerous if you start to receive that, if you start feeling that dopamine, and if you ever think it's something that will help finance a purchase for you, make sure you have cash you're paying your bill your full balance at the end of each month. The last thing that's dangerous about a credit card is our brains will anchor to the first number it sees. And so in any credit card statement, there's a minimum payment, and they make that really big. And so, that could be something like $20 a month, $50 a month, and your full balance. So once you anchor to that, then you are now emotionally going to feel like $20 is what you need to do. And then when you see the full balance, let's say it's $2,300,
Yeah.
you're going to reject that. It's going to be too traumatic, this idea of paying $2,300, because you're like, oh, the $20 looks really good.
Yeah.
And so, 75% of people don't pay their, their full balance. And I think so much of that is because of being anchored to this minimum payment. And then they do that, and then it wastes away their wealth and their finances and addicts them. And so credit cards are very dangerous. That my main rule about them is if you see that you've paid interest more than twice in a year, then you probably are not disciplined enough to have a credit card. So every credit card statement will show whether you've paid interest. And that means you're using the second product, you're using it to borrow money, and you should never do that. And then if you are finding yourself with a balance at the end of the month that you're not fully paying, because it may happen by accident or maybe once a year, that's probably okay. But if it happens twice, then to me, you've gone too far. And instead, you should use a debit card for certain things. Cash is the best, but nowadays cash is just not that practical because everything is online. But debit cards would be the next step if you're using that second part of a credit card.
Yeah, no, this is super interesting. And I remember, especially very young, recently married, we got into credit card debt, and I remember that I could see, because at that time, and I know laws have changed, and I grew up in Honduras, as you know, but they had fees and they have interest. So they were basically, it was not only the interest, but actually plus the fees that was actually ballooning. So I don't know, I think it multiplied a lot in a few months. And sadly enough, I went to the bank and it's like, I want to just do a loan fixed time for a year and then pay this. And they were like, no, but you're not that bad right now. And I'm like, this is not gonna stop. So I had to convince them to give me that I needed the loan to pay this. And I was like, it's for your benefit. And then, but at the end, they gave me the loan. And I just put the credit card on a shoebox for a year and then paid that. But I still remember it. And that forced me to never again go beyond my, basically pay every month and just use it, as you were saying, that method of getting that cash back and things like that. And it's just like method of exchange. That was kind of like, but I had to learn it in a hard way.
Yeah. And some can't get out, and then they have to declare bankruptcy, and then they can never own a house after that, or they can't, and it just puts you in a really hard spot for many, many years once you lose your credit, which we'll talk about in the next podcast.
Totally. I'm looking forward to that one. And then actually touching on this, because in this story, I was telling you, I was recently married. And so one of the issues was, we were a new couple living together, and it was kind of like we were spending from the same accounts but at different paces and everything. And so I would love your perspective on that part. Like, how do you do when either you're married or you're living together? How do you handle both budgeting and spending? I don't know. Like, what's the trick there for in your perspective?
I know. I think communication is huge. And if you're not tracking, you can't communicate, and so if you create a budget and then you just tell your spouse, this is the law, then that's going to cause all sorts of trouble. And then some people will say, oh, okay, how about we just separate our financial accounts and you do you, I'll do me. That's a really bad idea. And, there's so much hardship that occurs when you treat your spouse as separate of you, because money is so connected to the heart. And I think much easier is to just use a budgeting system, track, and then once a month you sit down and you look at your, what's going on. So that's what I do with my spouse. Once a month, we just look at what happened. We talk about it, and we talk about, whether things are sustainable and then I get, she has a few envelopes that she manages just on her own. So she mainly manages the groceries and, clothing. And so if that envelope goes negative, she'll just wait for it to fill up again, or she'll ask, for more. And that can switch, you get flip. Right now I'm kind of the budget guy, so I help kind of lead it, but it doesn't matter the sex, and so it's just nice to then she doesn't have to keep asking me about things, because she has her phone and she can see the exact balances of everything. So she never has to ask me like, can I do this or that? Like, she has all the information. So really it's just this clear, if you have all the data there and she can see it, or him or her can see it, then that creates really good conversation. And I think the second thing that really works well is if you don't assume someone who has a different money personality is worse. So I think just that presumption. So the people so I'm frugal and I don't like spending money. I'll think the big spenders are bad, and then the big spenders will think that the non-spenders are Scrooges. And if you go at each other presuming that yours is the right style and theirs is the wrong style, I think it's better to just look at and appreciate the good of their style. So a big spender is hospitable, they create beauty, they really let everyone feel welcome, and they love quality, and there's enjoyment in that. But then the dark side is they may get into debt, they may cause trouble, overspending. And then the non-spender has some neat qualities of simplicity and of sustainability, and not necessarily, and experiences over material things. But it's the dark side is trying to manipulate people and trying to control everything, and that Scrooge kind of world. But if you just forget about the dark side and focus on appreciating the good, then you'll enter into better conversations.
I love that. And I think, based on my experience, once we started to discuss and once we started to balance those things, it's like, we want to enjoy some of that, like the things that we're doing, making, but at the same time, let's just be responsible and not want to do everything at once, but actually let's do it in steps. That's actually when we learn to work together in terms of money and budget and all that. I mean, this is a great conversation. I'm pretty sure we could keep talking for an hour, but we are on time. Any final words that you would recommend to the audience?
I just would say spend less than you earn is the overall mantra. And then the more specific you name your budget, your envelopes, then the less you'll rate it. And then the more light you shine on what you're doing, the more likely you'll naturally change your behavior. So
cool. I love it. I love it. Thank you, Shane. As always, this has been a great conversation. And thank you everyone for listening to us.